Sean.
Sean can try. All right, let me just get out my first item. All right. Good evening, everyone. Could we all stand, please, for the pledge? Students, welcome back. If you could lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
Thank you. And I would like to ask for a moment of silence for Ms. Priscilla Kolpak, who passed away on August 22nd of this year. She began as a school aide in 1978 and worked for the Southington Public Schools until her retirement in December of 2009. So a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Okay, I will entertain a motion for the approval of minutes of the meeting of June 8th.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And another motion for the minutes of the June 29th special meeting.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And lastly, for the special meeting of August 17th.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is communication from our student board representatives. Welcome back.
Thank you. So good evening, board, and all those in attendance. It's great to see you guys again, and I hope you guys had a great summer. But without further ado, let's get right into our school report. So students have been transitioning into this new school year, and it's great to see everyone back at school. Students are starting to ease into the new block scheduling, and we've been hearing a lot of positive and negative feedback, and we plan to compile a survey with results about how kids feel about the new schedule later this year, once students get more acclimated to the new schedule. Senior sunrise took place on August 29th, and hundreds of seniors came to see the sunrise at 5:45 a.m. It was a great success, even though the sunrise wasn't really that great. But a lot of seniors enjoyed the donuts, cakes, and apples provided by the many sponsors. The seniors enjoyed seeing each other and kicking off their senior year together, and it was a great moment. On September 7th, Robotics Interest Night took place, where prospective members were able to learn about the team and the different operations that took place. Students took part in activities such as wiring, building, and learning more. Over the summer, the robotics team also participated in many off-season events such as WPI Battle Cry, Where's Wolcott Invitational, and also Indiana Robotics Invitational. They won many awards and placed very highly in all three competitions. The college fair will be taking place on September 19th from 6:15 to 7:45. The school will be showcasing many amazing universities and trade opportunities, and we hope to see many students in attendance. The Unified Arts Program held an amazing performance at the state's Welcome Back to the School meeting breakfast for educators on September 8th. And last but not least, FBLA competed in Atlanta for the national championship over the summer and had a great time, and they also performed extremely well. I'm going to be passing it on to Chelsea, who's going to talk about the sports report now.
Good evening, everyone. It is now time for our sports report. The fall sports season at SHS is off to an extremely hot and wet start, with multiple events postponed due to the weather during the opening week of the CIAC regular season. Despite these setbacks, our sports teams have presented great success. The Blue Knights varsity football team was able to play its season and home opener last Thursday evening, defeating New Britain by a score of 44-23. The field hockey team also was able to play its season and home opener last Friday afternoon, defeating Lewis Mills. The boys and girls cross-country teams started their season with a second and third place finish, respectively, at the Wilton Invitational last Saturday, and then followed it up with second place finishes for both teams in an away try-me versus Hall and Simsbury this past Tuesday. Tonight's girls swimming and diving team opened their season yesterday with an 82-78 home victory over E.O. Smith at the YMCA pool. Over at the middle schools, sports teams at JAD and JFK are conducting tryouts this week, and competitions are set to begin at the middle school of next week. I will now be passing it over to Akery with the district report.
Good evening, good evening, board. So for the district report, for South End, we have that South End Elementary will be participating in One Book, One School, reading the novel Finding Gobi, The True Story of One Little Dog's Big Journey. The author, Dion Leonard, and the real Gobi will be visiting our students on the October 18th for Accumulating Day. For GFK, we had a smooth opening to the school year, as well as a wonderful turnout at the open house last night. Students participated in Eagle Excellence assemblies on the second day of school, where an overview of everything GFK was presented. Our fall sports tryout and practices are underway. We encourage families to attend a sporting event after school one day. Numerous clubs and activities are offered after school. A full listing is on our website and will be sent to families in Mrs. Vukavich Weekly's email tomorrow. We encourage all students to join at least one club this year. For DePaulo had a fantastic start to our school year. Students on the blue team had a team building field trip to Camp Soper last week, and the silver team will be going to Camp Soper next week. This trip is for DePaulo's new sixth grade students to get to know their peers and their teachers, as well as to develop cooperations and team building skills. Over 200 students signed up to take a part in DePaulo Leadership's program. These students will be trained in leadership skills such as communication and team building this Saturday at Camp Soper. The DePaulo Leadership Program is designed to offer leadership opportunities to commit students, and Saturday's training is designed to make these leadership experiences successful. DePaulo had its open house last night. Thank you to all the parents that have attended. DePaulo is getting ready for Alex Lemonade stand at the Apple Harvest Festival. Student will be manning the booth for the 6 days of festival. Thank you, and let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Akery. Board members, anyone have any questions?
No, I appreciate, looking forward to hearing the survey results from the students for
Yeah.
with the block schedule survey. It's a great task you guys are taking on there. Interested to hear the feedback, so thank you.
Yeah. Could I ask, you mentioned the college fair. Did you already have that, or is it coming up? Oh, you did have it.
It's coming up.
Okay. And what was the date of that?
September 19th,
September 19th.
from 6:15 to 7:45.
Okay. Mr. Jaranowski.
With respect, I liked your question with regards to the block scheduling. Is that something that we could maybe put in the calendar for maybe a mid-year update or quarterly update so that we get a feel as to how things are moving?
As an agenda item?
Yeah,
Just, just as a follow-up and,
yeah, just
Yeah.
nothing,
yeah.
we don't need PowerPoint.
That's a great idea, no.
Just an update. Mr. Pepe's smiling over there, so.
Mr. Pepe likes those, okay. We can follow up?
Great, thank you.
Perfect, okay.
Sorry,
Mr. Bajewski.
I had one thing I wanted to build off of the college fair. So colleges, universities come in, what do we do? Do we have other, do we reach out to other trades in the area to come and do presentations, or do we?
Not for that fair. Last year, we had an entirely separate event. It was a career fair, which is when we did invite all of the outside, whether it was trades, vendors, local businesses, corporations, whatnot, and that was extremely successful.
Awesome.
So we hit it on both ends.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I was shocked to see all the local businesses that were there. In addition, all the students and their parents that came. It was really very well done and very well attended. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Excellent.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Communications from the Board of Education. Board members?
I think, one thing I'll say is I've heard lots of positive feedback from many parents about the kickoff to school and how things went. I can even give my own personal feedback from my kids. They're ecstatic coming home the first days. I think the biggest challenge my daughter said she faced was learning how to operate a locker at JFK for the first time. So, so anyways, good job to everyone.
So, I did get one phone call, and I bumped into somebody, they bumped into me at Stop and Shop.
That's where it happens.
Yeah, I should learn better, but anyway, the question, both questions were related to busing because of the issues that were happening in Meriden. Wanted to know if it was going to be an issue. I guess they evidently rely on the bus schedule, and they want to know, and I explained to them that, no, we're pretty locked in, pretty good for the school year. I don't know of any issues that,
I think the issues that you see relative to NBT, it is an entirely different group of employees. They're in a bargaining unit, the NBT employees that drive from Meriden, ours are not. So it's kind of its own separate pool. Most bus companies tend to pull from local anyways. And so we were okay with the start in terms of the strike from Meriden having no impact. But what you did see are the typical things, you know, new driver, new route, so it might be moving a little slower, delaying, you know, the pickup times, you know, kids either afraid to get on the bus, parents taking pictures at the bus stops as the kids were getting on the bus, you know, those types of things that can cause delays. And then obviously during dismissal, those transitions and routines are new for a lot of the kids, especially your kindergarten students, so that schools tend to go a lot slower and move more carefully early on to make sure the kids are all sent home on the proper buses and, you know, that everyone's safe. I would call it the typical beginning of year bumps, but beyond that, we were staff-wise and the contract with MBT, they're able to fulfill and staff.
I did have one other neighbor of mine from Spring Lake Village who was actually complaining, I guess, the traffic activity in front of DePaulo in the morning. And I'm usually 5 o'clock in the morning, when I go through there, it's nice and quiet.
Yeah.
Evidently, it's become a daily traffic jam. And wants to know, can anything be done? I told him to call the SPD. You know, they handle traffic in town, but
Yeah.
this is beyond us.
Yeah, it's an area we've tried, you know, to address many times over the years. It, I think ultimately boils down to, and definitely, beginning of the year, more kids would rather be driven to school than get on the bus. There's that angst to transition to middle school. It's also when it's certain sports season, kids are bringing equipment and gear and whatnot, and so parents tend to drive them in versus trying to bring everything on the bus, which leads to more traffic. And also remembering for those sixth grade families, the transitions and routines in that lot and that traffic pattern is new to them. So just as it is for students with buses, it is for parents with pickup and drop off, kind of getting used to where to enter, where to exit, that kind of thing. But I think ultimately that whole artery of exiting and entering is tough because it's a 2-lane road taking in, you know, 800 kids in a very small window.
I had to say, I was pleasantly surprised the first day because I did manage to get to all the schools. And I was surprised Pleasant Street was not as blocked as it normally is. And going from the high school down to DePaulo, that too did not seem as bad. I've seen it worse. But I think as time goes on, things get better because the traffic patterns will get, you know, better known and people hopefully will put their children on the bus. So we can hope for that, so.
Yeah, I think my biggest problem that opening day was getting caught behind a bus on Meriden Avenue, trying to get to the high school for the start of the day.
I was on
just to
time,
greet the
Mr.
kids.
Medancy. I'm just
And the
saying,
bus
just
stops
saying.
because there's no sidewalks at every house. So
Yeah.
if you get stuck behind the bus on Meriden Avenue, good luck to you.
Try driving through Burlington and Kensington.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any other board members? Mr. Brzezowski?
I had the opportunity to go to the DePaulo Open House yesterday. Great job by Mr. Palmieri and Mr. Lasbury. Again, absolutely awesome, well-oiled machine over there. It's always something proud for me as a board member, but also, you know, as a dad in our district, is seeing the level of parents that actually show up to open houses and these types of events where Calendar House was completely parked. People were parking over at that little street across, parking along near Evergreen Nursery, where, you know, I have friends that are teachers in Bristol and other school districts, and to get that level of turnout, it's sometimes a real challenge for them. So, again, awesome, down to some of the students actually having to volunteer, and I got there a little bit late, so it's like, where do I go? And then, oh, follow me, you know, so it was nice. Well, very well done.
Good. Okay. Communication from the administration. Mr.
Thank you, Madam
Medancy.
Chair. You know, along those lines, I don't want to, beat a dead horse, so to speak, because I think you all hit upon it nicely. But the opening of school this year, I had a lot of feedback from being in the buildings the first few days, and also just from families in the community about what a smooth opening it was. That was nice to hear. There's been a lot of anxiety, I think, around the past several openings for a lot of different reasons. And this year, it seemed to go, flow very nicely, other than the monkey wrench of the heat. I've taken on a whole new level of understanding, and understanding if none of you have ever heard of a hygrometer, that's a new term for you. A hygrometer will bring you into a classroom, and it'll show you the relative humidity and the temperature so that you get the feels like temperature for the little ones and the staff in those rooms. And some of those rooms were hitting 95 degrees when you take the temperature and the humidity in combination as part of the heat index. So even on Friday, when the temperature kind of dwarfed back down into the 80s, the humidity was so high at that point, higher than the previous 2 days, that it didn't really change the feel in the room all that much. It was still pretty stifling. So I think the staff expressed a lot of appreciation for the consideration. And from the families, normally when I make weather-related calls, I get a lot of criticism. I don't follow Southington Talk, so I don't know what they were saying there. But I will tell you, like, to my inbox, the feedback was 99% positive, and the 1% was really just people trying to understand it better, not necessarily complaining about decisions. So, a kudos to the administrators and the teachers for being ready, because that's what makes for a smooth opening. And so I just want to acknowledge all of those folks for the work. Mr. Romano and his staff, as you know, when the buildings are empty, that's the go time for them, because short of that, a lot of times they've got to do a lot of the projects and work orders and whatnot prior to school starting each day. It's a little harder, especially with projects that are more in-depth to do during the school day. So I will provide you at an upcoming meeting, like we usually do, a comprehensive list of all the summer work and projects that was done, so we can make sure to acknowledge them and the work that was done there. But just from being around the buildings, and knowing in our maintenance and custodial especially, the buildings we walked them all. The buildings looked immaculate for the start of school first day, and it's a real credit to our custodial staff, who many of those buildings are not air conditioned. They're in there throughout the summer, and for many of the buildings, we also use them for special programs, as Mr. Hinman's going to highlight tonight. So a lot of those custodians have to work around the summer use and still get, all of the rooms done, hallways done, bathrooms done, floors stripped, waxed, everything to be ready for day one. So just a huge shout out again to that crew for getting the buildings ready. Shifting a little ways, I'm going to, and we've talked about this last year, but I think this is our first meeting with school in session to bring up publicly. Given that we're not going to referendum in November 23, I think we all felt, based on the last enrollment study, that a need to pause in terms of what is the appropriate recommendation relative to a new Kelly school and what size it could be, the future of Landers School, and the future of Darrenowski School. That's been compounded a bit, because what I learned over the summer, I think it's a good thing we paused. The birth rates in Southington in both 2020 and 2021 are higher than they had been in previous years by a large amount. So our incoming K cohorts will be impacted in terms of the projections that we used prior, to that enrollment study being updated. And in addition, you all are aware of the recent legislation changing the start age of kindergartners for the years starting 2025. So all of that now needs to be factored into our enrollment, so we can understand better the building utilization and the size of the classes that'll be coming in the future, the cohorts. So this is a good year to really think more so about redistricting once we have updated enrollment numbers. I know I've heard Mr. Darrenowski saying this for a couple years now, like, what are we waiting for? I think the board as a whole would feel a lot more comfortable making recommendations if we were to take care of that first, and we had a firm and a lot of confidence, a firm feel for what the projected enrollments in each of the buildings could look like prior to making recommendations or going to another referendum in the future. So I'm going to start working by, obviously taking those factors into account relative to the enrollment study, and also starting to think about, the 2025 legislation and the classroom utilization that'll come from that. So I will keep you updated as we get ready for that work. And then lastly, just wanted to acknowledge, this week we had a moment of silence at the BME, but we also had a moment, I think, as a community reflecting on 9/11. It's, when we think about it, and I think about it now, a lot of our kids, they weren't born on 9/11 when it happened. And so it's important that we help them to understand and remember the significance and the impact of that event. And in addition to that, as I sat at a ceremony, Plantsville Ceremony Center at one point, and you think about the group of students, a few of us were there, and you'd say, what's their 9/11 going to be? Because I think we've all had an event at one point in each of our generations that just sticks out to us. And we hope it's nothing like that, and hopefully it's more positive times ahead for them. But, it was a nice tribute, I thought, by the community to the victims and the first responders of 9/11, and it's just important that we keep that at the forefront for our students so that that's never forgotten. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as well. And that concludes my report tonight.
Mrs. Carmody?
Just mentioning 9/11, I was teaching at the time and had a television in my room. I had 8 students who were in my classroom call me that day because we watched live when the second tower was hit. And it was just, I certainly, as an experienced teacher, didn't know how to comfort them because I couldn't believe what I was seeing also. And they called me that day because they remembered, that we sat there as a class watching it. And we were awed,
Yeah.
obviously. And so they had that memory from that day. And it will always stay with me also. Just a little
Yeah.
mention of that. Thank you.
Okay. Committee reports. The finance,
Oh, communications from the public.
oh, I'm sorry, I skipped, communications from the public. If anyone cares to speak about an agenda item? Okay,
Committee reports.
now committee reports. Okay. Mrs. Mallett?
Thank you. The Finance Committee met on Monday of this week to review a financial update on fiscal '23, the wrap-up of our previous fiscal year. We went through an 8-page document that's attached to the minutes of this meeting. The total expenditures in year '23 were $105,487,401, with an unexpended balance of $103,708. We also reviewed an item that we had reviewed in previous Finance Committee of an unemployment claim that we've been waiting for to clear through the state website. So that's in the amount of $17,342. We were made aware of that in March of '23, so we've encumbered those funds knowing that that claim is going to come through. So we would be making a request to the Board of Finance to deposit $86,366 in fiscal year '23 non-lapsing account. Then we proceeded to go through an update on the food services operations for fiscal '23. We've spoken all year about the SMART funds that were provided from the government this year and allowing the students to have minimal payments for meals, with the exception of part of December, January, and February, when our original SMART funds ran out before the state instituted the SMART Funds 2.0. So the results of their operations for the year generated a net profit of $684,603. And then we went on to discuss the mobile device management 5-year agreement. We had previously had that on our agenda during the May/June Finance Committees, and Mr. Savage, who's our network manager, had been able to reduce the number of devices that we needed covered and also to co-term the agreement to mirror our fiscal year end. And that work resulted in a savings, bringing the new agreement down from a cost of $24,452 down to $14,612. Then we also proceeded to introduce our new accounting manager, who started last week. His name is Mr. Kyle Fickle. He's also a Southington resident, and we look forward to working with him this year. We also talked about our new food service director after the retirement of Nia Walensky, after many, many years with us here at the Board of Education. And we also reviewed the fact that we have been selected for a review of our food service program, which used to happen every 3 years, but had been a little bit derailed for scheduling due to the COVID pandemic. So we knew when we were interviewing for replacements that the review was coming. So we have been notified, and they will be on site with us at the end of March. So Ms. LaFay and I sat through about 7.5 hours of training this week with the State of Connecticut nutrition folks, and they give a lot of advice as to what you can do to prepare for the audit, or they call it a review. So we will be working on that over the next several months. And that concludes our report.
Review sounds nicer than audit.
Yes.
Does anyone have any questions?
No.
Sean?
I do. Ms. Mellor, you mentioned in the device management savings that Mr. Savage was able to achieve 24,000 down to 14,000. What, can you just rehash that so I can write it down? What exactly was that savings? The difference?
The difference?
24 to 14?
Oh, it's in the minutes of our finance committee. So
Okay.
it went from 24,452 down to 14,612.
share.
And it is
Yeah.
a 5-year agreement. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one question. How are the signups going for free and reduced lunch? I know there was some confusion in the public. Is it everybody getting free lunch? Is it just breakfast? And
Sure, the new program is called Stable Funds, and all students will receive free breakfast. The students that are classified as reduced or free students will also receive free breakfast. The students that are full pay will be paying for lunches. If anybody wants snacks, those are also, will be paid for with cash.
Okay.
People are able to put money onto their student's account, either through the My Payments Plus, which does charge a credit card processing fee. Those fees do not come to the Board of Education. Or they can also send a check in with their student made out to the Southington School Lunch Program, and they would give it to the cashier, and they would deposit it directly into the student's account with no fees deducted from that. I don't have any feedback on how many free and reduced applications have been completed, but that was part of the training that Ms. LaFay and I went to with the food services. And each of those right now are going into the school offices, and they're maintained confidentially. So
Okay.
we are going to continue, though, to encourage families, if they think they might be able to qualify, to go ahead and fill those out.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anyone else? Mr.
Just
Oshana?
a couple of points. We ended the year with excess of $86,366. Just to show how well the administration manages the funds, that's 0.08% of our budget. So, I mean, if you start looking at 0.08% of a budget, 86,000 is a lot of money, but when you compare it to where we were as an overall budget, I think congratulations on how well this was managed. The only part that concerns me about that is when you start looking at the attachment, and we went over it in the Finance Committee, a lot of the savings, back in December, there was a freeze put on supplies, like a hard freeze, no spending of supplies. So a lot of that savings comes from the supplies that weren't spent, including things like general classroom supplies, things that teachers would have to supply for their own classroom, kindergarten supplies, family consumer assignments. It's all listed in the document here. It's great that it was able to come out so close. I mean, you're dead on, really, for doing that, and thank you for that. It's just disappointing a little bit that it comes out of the supply budget that we weren't able to spend, knowing, of course, it was going to be a tough year. The freeze was put on. I just hope we could maybe keep a better eye on that this upcoming year as we start looking at supplies, so we don't put that burden on the teachers. And second point, so 86,000 sounds like a lot of money, and it is. over the past several years, that non-lapsing has been a significantly higher amount, right? And that's all because of COVID, right? Money that we didn't spend. I think we talked about this last year. We're going to see the non-lapsing funds dropping dramatically, and this is the first year of it where it's, it's 86, but it's significantly lower than the 200, 300,000, 400,000 that we've had in the past, so that trend's not going to continue. All right, thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Mellon. Okay. Superintendent's report is next, the personnel report.
Move to approve the personnel report as presented by the,
Superintendent.
by the,
Administration.
by Michelle.
Second.
Mr.
I think Dave
Jaranowski.
seconded.
There's one person who is on that list that is leaving us. I have a little history with, Mr. Campbell,
Yeah.
Ah,
and I was surprised. I thought he was going to stick around at least till the end of the school year where I could hopefully get even with him. But I think he slid this in, because I did bump into him during graduation when he was setting up the sound system. And when I say we have history, way back when he was first with the board, I happened to be the chair, and at convocation, I think you know the story, but everything with the high school was packed. Everybody was giving their speech. Rick Torino give his
union.
classic
Yep.
His poems.
Yes, his poem.
Right.
And I was introduced, I got up to the microphone, and the sound system went down. I gave about a 10 or 15-minute
I love
speech, welcoming the teachers, the staff, and everybody. And the system came on when I said, let's have a good year.
He didn't do that on purpose, did he? No,
He says no, but anyway, every time I see him, I said, how's the sound? And I was hoping that, I didn't realize it was 25 years later. Here he is retiring, and I never had an opportunity to really have him come before the board. I know he may be coming when retirees get called back. My luck, he won't.
We'll have to wait
I'm
and-
gonna try and find out where they're going to have his retirement party. I'm going to
Gonna crash it? You heard it here.
Revenge.
Revenge is sweet.
I think that's tomorrow.
It's at an establishment tomorrow, and I'll send you the
Let me
location.
know where.
Okay,
Oh, boy.
okay. Any other discussion on the personnel report? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Old business, town government communications. Do we have any? Someone gets to leave early. Town government communications, anything? No? Okay. Next up on the agenda is the summer school update. Mr. Medancy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'd like to bring Mr. Tom Henman up this evening for a presentation to all of you, as is customary this time of year, where we try to do a recap and a summary for all of you on the Summer Academy. I want to give Tom a huge shout out and acknowledge his hard work. He puts a lot of effort into this, pays great attention to detail. When I was up the high school this summer, just paying a visit, as kids were wandering in the building, some not always so promptly for summer school, Tom was at the door ready to greet them, and in some cases walk kids where they needed to be and make sure they were meeting with success. So, Tom is one of our rising stars and has done a great job with this program since taking it over, and I really want to give him the opportunity to showcase and highlight his great work for all of you this evening. So, Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Medancy, and thank you, everybody, for having me this evening. Hopefully, I can give you kind of an overview of what we did this summer and some of our really positives and some of our negatives at the beginning of the process so we can get an overall view of what happened. Last year, when I walked away from the presentation, one of the things that I really thought about as I was driving home is that I didn't necessarily give kudos to the true heroes of the Summer Academy, and that honestly is the teachers that are coming and working throughout the summer during that time. So this slide here is just kind of a list of the names of the teachers that we're working with in our 3 programs. This year was another year where we housed them separately at the 3 buildings, DePaulo housing our K to 5, JFK housing 6 to 8, and the high school obviously with the 9 to 12 program. And the high school program does look like a lot of names. We had a huge number of nurses that were in, as we have a nurse that staffs each building all day, every day. And they worked really diligently to make sure that we were staffed at all times and there was somebody there to service the kids if something were to occur in the building. I also kind of wanted to give a quick shout out to Ms. Amy Zappone and Stephanie Lawler and Mr. Pepe as well for their support and help through all the planning stages and making sure that we were staffed. I knew who needed to be at what spots, who was the best fit for what spots. You know, being at the middle school and elementary, or in high school for the majority of my career, sometimes elementary teachers, I don't know them all that well. So with their expertise, they were able to help me make sure that we had teachers where they needed to be. So at the beginning of the process, if we really think about the start, we begin planning in January, February. And I don't necessarily have a slide with this information. I met with Mr. Pepe and Ms. Zappone to talk about what the structure of the program would look like and, you know, what the idea was for this summer. One of the things that was kind of the question is that idea of staffing the program with teachers who truly were high quality and really wanted to be there to work with those kids and making sure that we had the funding appropriately to do so. At the time, we worked with, it's gone, her name just escaped me, our grant writer.
Joanne Keller.
Thank you, Joanne Kelleher. And we applied for 2 grants, with the Barnes Foundation for $20,000 and the Main Street Community Foundation for $6,000. The unfortunate reality is both of those grants applications came back in May as we were denied for all funds that we had applied for. There was another opportunity where we had a partnership that we were trying to build with YMCA Camp Sloper, where Mark Pooler was applying for a grant for, I believe it was $100,000. Where if he had a certain population of students at the camp, he would receive these funds to assist with transportation, and we could have some of our students transported from half-day program at the school to half-day program at the camp. Unfortunately, Mr. Pooler was also not receiving those funds. So in the beginning of May, we still were in the status of designing a program, unsure as to how we were going to be funding the entire thing. So some of our numbers this year might look a little bit different, and that was kind of a result of that, and I'll talk a little bit more through that process when we get there. Some of the positives that I can talk about in terms of like our streamlining. I'm always trying to look at the systems that we have in place and figure out what we can do better to make things easier for those that are involved. Our registration process has been done completely online through the use of Google Forms, blasting through Parent Square to parents and accessing, whether it be on a phone, a laptop, or any mobile device, parents can access and give us all the information we need to register their students. We always have students with IEP and 504 documents, and this has always been a collaboration with Ms. Cavallero's office, getting those documents and then trying to distribute them to teachers, whether it's paper copies and getting them folders of confidential information. This year, we worked to keep it digital, where I owned all the documents online and I linked them within the attendance sheets that the teachers were accessing every day. So there was no trying to find those documents or worrying about where they went. We had them in one safe place at all times. Timesheets, working with Sharon Papalo in the payroll office and Jen, we worked to go away from paper timesheets, and teachers were using the Frontline system where they were checking in and checking out at the end of the day and being paid for their contractual agreement that we had set them up with my review at the end of each week. And then finally this summer, it's not something that went in for this current summer program, but something we're looking at because it's been used in the past, was the My Payments Plus system for tuition payments. Parents have been having to write paper checks, and the number of requests that I got this summer for parents who said, I don't have a checkbook. How do I pay for this? And getting creative on that one with them was an interesting navigation for me. So I did some work this summer while I was there with Sandy Mikowitz, the bookkeeper at the high school, and looked at the systems that we had used in the past and what that structure might look like moving forward for the coming summer as well. So always trying to improve there. So when we look at the actual program that we ran, very similar to years past, the K-8 Academy at both buildings had 2 different sessions that ran for about 90 minutes each, a session A from 9 to 10:30 and a session B from 10:30 to 12. The high school continued to run 3 sessions, going from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock, each one being about 2 hours in length. That one enrichment session was kind of bumped out a half hour, as we do have a faculty member who had like a little childcare thing, so we were able to move that one slot a half hour so that she could come and go as she needed for that day. All the programs ran from July 3rd to July 27th, where there was a total of 18 days of instruction for students at the 9 to 12 program and 16 days of instruction for the K to 8 students. K to 8 goes Monday through Thursday with Fridays off. 9 to 12 goes Monday to Friday. So we'll start with the elementary academy. That was at the DePaulo Middle School. So if you look at our enrollment numbers, this is kind of where that not being 100% sure of the funding piece kind of came into play here. So we focused on students that are currently in Tier 3 intervention for reading and math at all of our elementary schools. We had 103 students that enrolled this year, down 63 from last year. The comparison really comes into the fact that last year, where we were kind of funding this program through the ESSER funds, we were able to invite both Tier 3 and Tier 2 students. So we sent out over 500 invitations to students and families last year. This year, we only sent out 204 students, as that's the number that were in that Tier 3 status. So a lot less were invited to the program with the uncertainty of where we were headed. We were able to secure 8 high-quality teachers that came in to run the program and had experience running the program in years past. And with some of the numbers, we were able to facilitate a co-teaching model where we had maybe a little bit larger of a class size, 13 to 14 students in the classroom, but the 2 adults that were able to do more small group instruction and really that individualized attention that they need at this level and in that program. And as always, at the elementary level, the PD, all teachers received a 4-hour professional development day. And I give them a lot of credit because it was the day after school got out. We came right back.
Bless them.
And Ms. Lawler and her curriculum specialist provided some professional development on what that curriculum should look like at the different levels and what the books and the materials that they would have within the classrooms to facilitate that well. This year was also kind of an exciting piece for me that we were able to reintroduce our elementary enrichment program. So this is a completely tuition-based program where we offer some kind of fun, hands-on, get them up and moving activities that the district can provide families. As the first year of me rolling it out, it was a little bit smaller than I had anticipated, but it was a good start. I had 5 teachers that came on board, one of which was a new teacher at the middle school who volunteered to come and do an elementary class on Let's Get Moving. So we had like a physical, outside playing sports and games and activities, learning the different rules and those kinds of things. Pinspiration was a really kind of interesting one for me to stop in on, where they had like a Pinterest page of things that they had found, and they worked together to kind of collaborate on what they really liked and found exciting. And then the teacher purchased the materials to build those things in class during their time, and then obviously we reimbursed the teacher for those materials. We did have one course that we were unfortunately not able to run just due to lack of enrollment. We had 2 students that had signed up for that, but I worked with those families on that course to get them into something that was still an area of interest and make sure that they were in a place that they wanted to be. So we had about 27 families that participated in the elementary enrichment program this summer, and I have a lot of ideas and a lot of plans on how I can really kind of increase those numbers for the coming summer, based on my experience this year. If we look at the middle school, so the middle school is a program that runs very similar to the K to 5, where we kind of focus on students receiving reading and math intervention, but we also include those students that need what we call course recovery, as they're not earning credits, but it's those students that were unsuccessful in passing an academic course during the regular school year. This summer, we had Heather Allenbeck, who's the social studies department leader at the high school, as the interim associate director for that program, so she was there facilitating that every day. We only had 4 teachers, one who was running our algebra readiness program for students coming out of 7th grade math into algebra 1 and 8th grade. And then, as always, we had the PD and the curriculum provided by the lit specialist and the math coordinator. So this is another one where the enrollment looks less, as again, we only had less invitations that went out, being Tier 3 focused. So there were 53 students that were invited to participate in that Tier 3 intervention. And then there were 17 students who were invited for course recovery, but there were overlaps in those lists. There were some students that didn't pass the courses, but also were receiving intervention during the school year. In a positive note, obviously, and our attendance rate there was huge for this one. We had a very successful program at the middle school. And in terms of those students that needed course recovery, we were able to get all but 3 students actively enrolled in the program and there on a regular basis. And those 3 names, obviously, we did what we could. When we look at the high school, so obviously my area of expertise here is that's where I lived on the day-to-day. We had a really kind of cool opportunity this year partnering with KSA. So KSA in the past couple of summers has run a program of their own, but I worked with Mr. Levin and Mark Hill this summer to kind of understand what those students needed and what courses we had that might be able to service them as well. They had sent me a list very early in the summer of about 11 students, I think it was, that needed some kind of credit recovery from KSA. And working with the families, I was able to get all 11 students actively enrolled in the program. So our numbers in comparison to last year, we were up 18 students overall of those students that needed some kind of credit recovery. However, if you notice the health 1 through 4 with the +6, according to the handbook, a student must have a 51 average or higher in order to be eligible for summer school. Based on our grading practices, if they have a grade below a 50 at the end of a quarter, we give them a 50 to give them a chance to still pass for the year. Working with Mr. Bignacki into the registration process, we loosened up those guidelines for health because of the shift to block and some of those limited opportunities that students might have in their coming schedules to earn that credit within the school year. So we opened that door to more families with health and PE to make sure that if they had an opportunity that they could take advantage of it now during the summer. So that's kind of why that number was a little bit greater. And the teacher of that course, Rob Levesque, he actually was great in being flexible and working with those students and really making sure that we were able to service what they needed during the summer. And in this program, I'm always very fortunate where I have 11 teachers. I had a bunch of turnover in terms of teachers that left the district or moved on to another district, retired, et cetera. And a lot of new staff that came on and they were willing to jump in and kind of take over. One of them, interestingly enough, was one of the math teachers that I had hired for this school year who hadn't officially worked for the district yet, but was onboarded. And I said, "You want to come on board?" And he came in. He started with us right at the beginning of July, and it was a good experience for everybody. The scheduling piece of the high school is obviously always a challenge, making sure that we can get as many credits as possible for those students. And as you can see, we had an 88% success rate where the students that weren't able to earn those credits, those are the 2 reasons. One, either we unfortunately have to kind of dismiss them from the program because of attendance purposes if they're not there on the regular basis, which, as Mr. Medancy said, that was my daily task, calling kids and wondering where they were, greeting them at the door when they were there. But the other reason, obviously, just not necessarily completing the work in the program itself and not earning a passing score overall. In a breakdown, 1% of those failures was due to academics, 11% was because of attendance. Yeah. The last thing on there was something that I had pushed for really last year when I kind of took over the program was the curriculum provided by the Southington High School department leaders. We wanted to ensure that what the students were being asked to do in those 18 days to earn that credit was in alignment with what the students had to complete during the regular school year, and that they weren't kind of getting by with some lighter work. They were still meeting the curriculum standards that were set forth, and they were doing the necessary things to progress into the next class. So just in terms of looking forward, planning for next summer, as I had said, I have a lot of ideas kind of rolling through my head already, and I can't wait to meet with Mr. Pepe to start hashing some of those out. You know, in looking at the enrollment and the enrichment for the remediation programs, I'm looking at the timeline of that, and enrichment has to happen months earlier than it's happened in years past. I've got to get out there ahead of the summer camps. That's one thing that I know for sure. So that's something that I'm going to be looking at here. And then with the remediation programs to support those students, I think that also has to get out there earlier, as there's a lot of families that have already paid for summer camps at that point and aren't able to send their students even though they would like to. One of the things that we have to consider, obviously, is the tuition costs. This program was the last summer that I believe that we're able to fund with the ESSER funds. So the high school students, in terms of credit recovery, are going to be going back to looking at a tuition-based program starting next summer. What is that tuition cost going to look like based on the hourly salary of the teachers, and making sure that we do have a zero-sum program at the end? And, you know, how do we support those families that do have some kind of financial need? It'll be my first summer navigating that, so I've got some ideas and some things to learn there myself. Teacher compensation is always the question. You know, we moved it up a little bit this year to kind of entice some high-quality staff? Do we look at just moving forward with contractual rates, or is that something that we're able to do again? And I'm looking at a structural redesign based on some of the enrollment. When you look at the numbers at the middle school and the numbers at the elementary school, is it possible to maybe combine them into one program and kind of bring the programs together and utilize less space in the time that we do this? Also, like I mentioned earlier, the digital access to the payment platform, moving onto My Payments Plus and moving away from the paper checks for those families that are able to do so. And then the staff time and attendance, as much as we made some great strides this summer, there's some things we could iron out to make it a little bit easier moving forward as well. So some other conversations to have. So that actually concludes my presentation. So if you have any questions.
Mr. Carson?
First question specifically to staffing. And you hit on it on your last slide, and Assistant Superintendent, feel free to jump in on this one. It was my understanding that going into this summer that the pandemic stipends were being removed for summer teachers. Am I correct in stating that?
Yeah, the original rate was back to the contractual rate post-pandemic.
Okay, and so for the teachers that we hired for this summer cycle, did we then go above and beyond the contractual rate to attract them, or no?
Yeah, so it was, I'd say, a midpoint. We went from a rate based on the pandemic and wanting to attract and being able to staff, because the numbers were huge at that point, compared to the contractual rate, which was much, much lower. So we entered into an agreement for just last year at a midpoint to attract the quality teachers.
Okay, and so parlaying off of that information, moving into this coming summer, how do you recruit either the same group of teachers or a new group of teachers to meet our needs within the district? And do you foresee it as a problem if we stay at contractual rates?
So that's one factor, right? We've got the cost of teachers. We also have the cost of nursing staff. We have the cost of the building usage, and we have the cost of transportation. It all rolls into a number. And when we take a look at the number of Tier 3 students, as Tom mentioned, we did not target our Tier 2 students, which we wanted to all along, but knowing that if we get more students, we need more staff, we need more space, we need additional transportation, the number continues to grow. So the question is spot on. This is the stress every single year of knowing that we want to service students. We have staff that will come in and bend over backwards to try to get them across that line. But what is that number? Prior to COVID, it was tuition-based. So everyone paid. And you can imagine that not everyone is, we'll say, willing or able to pay in order to continue their school through the summertime. So the success rate was much lower prior to COVID funding and being able to supplant that money.
For several of my years as principal at Kennedy Middle School, we would often only get total between the two middle schools 6 to 8 kids come to summer school, and at the time it was twofold. There was a cost factor involved, and there was language in the policy that says it's recommended, not required, was the old language. And this board has since changed that policy that if you fail a class, it's required, and so that's, before you could have, it was 1F or, and Ds would be recommended. Now, if you fail any class, you have to go to summer school for that class, as you should, because you shouldn't advance to the next course if there's, knowledge or information or content or curriculum you hadn't mastered previous, especially in courses that have prerequisite skills associated with them. So, yeah, and I think to your point, when you have the federal funds and we were able, probably at the most difficult time, and we're trying to recover from learning loss, to offer teachers the per diem rate, which is far higher than even what we were able to give them this summer. You give teachers caviar and say, come back and work for chicken, it's a hard sell, you know? So I do think we have to get creative in how we're gonna get there.
Hot dogs.
Okay, and
So to be continued.
You're right. Okay, perfect. And then my second question, Mr. Hinman, is you spoke to it a little bit without, without actually delivering any dessert items, but I'm going to ask you for 60 or 90 seconds of what your insight and ideas are. But can you give us some quick insight on how you will increase the interest and enrollment numbers in the elementary enrichment program?
Sure. So my understanding of the process and the way that it had been run in previous years was we take the courses that we've run in the past, we reach out to those teachers to see if they're interested to do it again, do they want to redesign, and then we look at possibly rolling that information out to families. So the information that I had inherited from Dave DiStefano, who ran the program previously, was a significant help in that process. As the elementary enrichment program for the past couple of years has kind of petered off as we focused more on the Tier 2, Tier 3 intervention students, it was new to me this year. So it was a later start to the entire thing, which is the significant impact there, because I needed to get those invites out as priority one. So one of the things that I was doing and thinking about was sending an email first, staff-wide. Who's interested in possibly? What could we offer them in terms of the incentives of running the program? What might that compensation package look like? If they're interested in offering an enrichment program, they have that creativity piece where it's 16 days of instruction on a program that's of their own design. So if they've had something that they wanted to run, give me a course like overview. What do you think it's going to look like? What is it going to entail? Putting together this packet and getting that out to families January, February.
Okay, so a timing component.
Oh,
to-
yeah. Timing is the big thing. And then this year, because I was late in starting that enrichment process, I only had about 6 or 7 teachers that were kind of looking to run courses. So then my course offerings were significantly less. So if I can get the staff on board earlier, get significantly more course offerings to expand what we're able to get out to the kids in terms of areas of interest, and then get the invites out earlier, I think that we'll have a significant increase in terms of those families that are interested in enrolling.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, if I could. So first of all, thanks for the presentation. I think it's a great success story of the summer program, especially looking at the high school rate where, you said, 88% success, and really only 1%, right, was actually academic performance.
Correct.
Otherwise, it was, so that just speaks to the quality that goes into the summer program. So thank you for that. Kind of want to go back to the finance question. Do we know what the tuition rates were pre-COVID? You may not know it offhand, but if it's something that maybe we could get back, I'm just curious kind of what that looked like.
We used to use My Payments Plus to have the kids enroll, and I helped Dave DiStefano with that. So yes, I'm sure we can look up what they were
Okay.
in the system and replicate them.
Okay.
As much as it's not an accurate number, from my recollection, I know it was somewhere north of about $200 per course.
Okay.
Did you have a question, Mr. Darrenowski? Oh, I thought you did.
He was letting you know that I've been
Oh.
trying my hand.
You can kick me if you
So
want.
to build off of Jasper's point, with paying the higher, I guess, premium, if you will, for teachers to come back during summer, could we also get an idea of what that tuition cost would be? So essentially, maybe comparing the old tuition cost and then essentially a more enticing tuition cost for actually getting teachers to be involved. Now, maybe this is just ignorance on my end, but can you explain to me the major difference between a Tier 2 student and a Tier 3 student?
Sure.
Thank you.
So a Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention is defined by two things. Really, it's the size of the group that's receiving the intervention and the frequency of the intervention. So a student that's enrolled in Tier 3 is typically in a group of about 3 to 5 students receiving an intervention almost on a daily basis, focused on their area of need. It might, maximum intervention time length is about 30 minutes. versus a tier 2 student might be in a group of 5 to 8 students where they're on an intervention basis of possibly every other day or every 3 days.
So the tier 3 is a more aggressive, more intense intervention.
Right.
Compared to a tier 2.
And that's specific to the summer schooling.
That's specific to our SRBI model across the district in every school.
Okay.
So that's a during the school year model. So that's how they identify, like the invitations, obviously want to go out to the kids that are having more frequent, intense intervention occur during the school year, because that means their needs are greater. So we tend to say they're students with tier 3 services or students with tier 2 services.
Okay.
And that's in addition to students that receive special education through an IEP or services through 504.
That's essentially how we make that determination. Now, in looking at some of the slides where, again, middle school, with their certain amount of needs and things like that, based on the teaching ratios and things like that, are we in a position where if you offer it to tier 2, you have to send out a letter to all tier 2 students? Or is it something where, when we're able to recognize, and going back to your, Mr. Hinman, your point of timing is everything, would it behoove us to sort of maximize, I hate to say it this way, but like the teaching capacity of a teacher, where, okay, realistically, they could have another 2 or 3 students in the class? Is it worth reaching out at some point to those tier 2 students? And again, like maybe even selectively, based on, IEPs and, the information that we get during the school year? Is that something that?
In the planning of summer 2022, last summer.
Right.
That actually was part of the process. So we rolled out tier 3, we rolled out tier 2, and then we had reached out to all elementary school and middle school administrators and said, now we've reached all of these families with a tier 2, tier 3.
Right.
Are there any existing students in your building that might not fall under that umbrella, that you still have significant concerns over potential learning loss during the summer? And could we benefit those students? And they had sent us names, and we continued to invite them. So it is something that we have done historically. Would love to be able to provide that for families as well, but again, with the uncertainty of the budget and being able to provide that this summer, that wasn't something that we were able to do.
Again, just thinking of if we are going to have to get back to charging a tuition.
So I do plan on, as part of my budget preparation for all of you for the fall, bringing you more information about summer school and what we might consider as a board to address that.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
All right.
I would just like to say your enthusiasm
I know,
to
exactly.
get those programs out earlier to the public, and obviously it's the teachers, especially for the enrichment, to get their ideas on board early, because those camps start, yeah, they start in January.
Yep.
So the earlier you can get them out, because those teachers have great ideas that, what can they do in 16 days? Amazing things if we let them, so.
The math teachers at the high school are always laughing when they come in and I'm working on something, and I'm like, I've got a summer school thing I'm working on, and they're like, it's February.
Yeah, they have no idea.
And I'm in full swing.
And you're going full boat, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just love that idea, so thank you very much, Mr. Hinman, for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along on our agenda, public comment. Any comments from the public about any topic that's not on the agenda? Okay, not seeing anyone. Mr. Darrenowski. Taking your time.
Take my time, I'm in no hurry. Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Goodbye, Mr. Medancy. Have a good run. Should we all wave? Should we all wave to you from the van? Don't fall.